Little bow. Say hey. Say hey to the camera. The other night, a couple of nights ago, my friends John Fashcroft and Aquila had invited me onto their stream, the Eagle's Nest. Bo, come on now. Come on. There you go. Let's chill. Invited me onto the Eagle's Nest to talk a little bit about Operation Gladio. I want to thank them, and I'll put a link to that stream in the box below. And I also put a link to Aquila's YouTube channel. He has a podcast about fitness and health and a variety of other things called the Iconoclast. So I'll put a link to it in the box below as well. It was spur of the moment. I'd gotten home from work in the gym, so I wasn't really prepared. And unfortunately, it's been a while since I've really looked into Gladio. I haven't studied it much over the past year. Some of the names were a little fuzzy to me, you could say, the important names. But Gladio is extremely important to study for our guys. Because I believe that it is as relevant as ever with what we see happening currently, both with the war in Russia and Ukraine. And there's also a term my friend Pat, and I'll put a link to his channel in the box below as well, he calls it American Gladio. If you know anything about PatCon and some of the events that happened with both far left and far right political movements in this country, which Gladio, of course, was a European incarnation ran by the CIA. It was most violent in Italy during the Years of Lead. I'll put a link to a stream that me and my friend Ronin did about a year ago, talking about the Years of Lead in Italy. It was also prominent in Belgium, the Netherlands, and there was evidence of it also in West Germany during the Cold War. It's very important, I believe, to study this, because these tactics that the intelligence agencies, such as the CIA, MI6, these tactics that they used during the Cold War are, as we see it, I believe, folding right in front of our very eyes. I'm going to walk down here to the woods. I'm going to title this video, Staying Out of Traps. For those of you that do not know, and I'm not going to waste much time talking about this, but the reason it was entitled Operation Gladio, they named it after the Roman sword, the gladius, the double-edged sword that gladiators would use in combat. There is an edge on the right side of the blade, but also an edge on the left side of the blade. They call it Operation Gladio, and what that entails is that these intelligence agencies, they were involved, sometimes heavily, with both fascist and even left-wing or communist political movements and organizations back in the back during the decades of the Cold War. Gladio was originally intended to be the formation of these fascist fighters who had been left over at the end of World War II. Basically what happened is, and see, the Germans, the National Socialists, when they started to realize that World War II was going to result in their total defeat, they formed what they called stay-behind networks. I believe the Germans called this Project X. You will have to forgive me. I know it involves the letter X. I'm not sure the specific name right this second, so you'll have to forgive me there. Like I said, I'm rusty on this material. But what it was, as the fascists in Italy and the National Socialists, as they were being driven backwards by both the Soviet, American, the Soviets in Eastern Europe, the Americans from the South, and the British from the West and South also, they formed these stay-behind networks. And these guys were supposed to lead in sabotage efforts against the Allies in the Soviet Union. The Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, as they came across, or the MI6, as they came across these cells of these fascist fighters, oftentimes they would just kill them, line them up against, make them dig a ditch, dig a trench, line them up against the wall and shoot them, or they would encourage them to work for the Allies. The Allies, the intelligence agencies, allowed them to keep their, sort of fascist ideology, but they worked for them. You see, they would approach a leader of a cell in, say, a town or village, perhaps in Italy or the Ukraine or, elsewhere, France, and they'd be like, hey, we want you to work with us against the communists. If you do not work for us, well, we're going to kill you. So unfortunately, a lot of these instrumental operatives, these German or Italian operatives, they would cave into the pressure, understandably. And theoretically, what Gladio was, it was these stay-behind networks spread throughout Europe that were supposed to mimic what the Germans had set up if there was ever a communist Soviet takeover of Western Europe. There was weapon caches, caches of gold, because these sort of fascist fighters, they were supposed to lead the resistance against this theoretical communist takeover. But of course, the communist takeover, there was never any sort of hot war, any sort of invasion that took place. There was lots of espionage and other intelligence agency fuckery that took place. But over the decades, from the end of World War II on up until the Soviet Union fell in 1991, these intelligence agencies realized that these fascist fighters could be used for a variety of nefarious purposes. I've studied Gladio extensively, and over time my opinion on it has shifted somewhat. When I first heard of it 2 years ago, I was of a different opinion, but now, over the years of producing things about it, my opinion has shifted somewhat. How does that relate to our current predicament today? I'm really starting to think that a decent portion of dissident activity here in America is staying out of traps. There is a sort of blind spot, as my friend Pat has mentioned before, when it comes to American white nationalism, and it's how the intelligence agencies are involved with it. There is a lot of entanglement, and when I got into this, I had no idea that it was this treacherous. I thought it was just a random collection of people who were concerned about the future of their people, that seen what was going on, and that is not all, though. That is not all of it. Staying out of traps, you have to be observant, because believe you me, there are traps everywhere, unfortunately. Dissident activity, it goes back to controlled opposition, and I'm not going to mention any names or anything like that because I don't have proof. But unfortunately, man, my Serbian neighbors up there, they're having them a little cookout. They're up there yelling, kids running around. But they are, I have came to believe that a lot of white nationalist activity that we currently see, not all of it, I'm not going to, castigate everything, but I do believe that there is evidence that perhaps some of this shit is controlled opposition. I'm not going to mention names, but there are things that I have seen, and as Pat had put it, there are recurring trends that you will notice if you have been in this long enough. Staying out of traps is something that you just basically have to learn yourself. One of the best ways to do that is to just observe. In that stream I did last week, I talked about how over the past 9 months I have taken on a policy that I call no new friends. I don't mean this to be standoffish, but as I have mentioned numerous times before, I think here in 2000, we see it in 2023, and we are going to see much more of it next year because, America follows this sort of frenetic, autistic, just spastic 4-year election cycle. The gay ops and the psyops, I believe, are only going to heat up. And, I never call anybody feds that are in these circles, but believe you me, there is a presence of them. I don't call people feds, and I don't call them snitches either, but there are people that just, they set off my senses. I feel like I've gotten to a point where I can read people quite well, even online on how they conduct themselves. With these people, I just keep my distance. I stay away from them. I want nothing to do with any fucking informants or snitches or agents. I want nothing to do with any of it. There are a lot of informants, people that will report on things. A part of staying out of traps, I made this video, I'll just put a link to it in the box below, called A Warning. I made this video back in January. You've got to watch what you say online. You can't make actionable threats or statements. Now I look at myself, and I do have rather an edgy persona, I guess you could say. I am not a disavouer, as we like to call them. I don't disavow violence. But I don't condone it either. I can't condone it. I don't want to end up locked up for saying stupid shit online. I'm not encouraging it. And I've made this point a million fucking times and I'm tired of talking about it, but I'll let the late great Tom Metzger speak for me right here.
Despite the gang-like nature of the skinheads and his own knack for confrontation, Tom Metzger claims to reject violence, except as a last resort. But he does believe it increasingly inevitable that whites will travel a violent path.
And if you'll study the history of riots in this country, when white people really had it all the way up to there and broke loose, they got mean. They're long-suffering, but they can become so mean.
Okay. You heard the clip there. That is what I believe as well. I believe that eventually things will come to push and shove, and you need to be prepared for such a situation to the best of your abilities. Now, that is why on this channel I've always stuck to what we would call the classical message, which is just build your own tribe, build yourself a family, and be the best version of yourself as possible. Now, I want to see us break away from the system, or at least become self-reliant and resistant to some of the system's sort of stipulations that they may place upon us. But I am not opposed to people who perhaps have the intelligence or the inclination to, say, infiltrate the system and, you know, subvert it in some sort of fashion. I'm not opposed to that. I used to be, but nowadays, you know, we're in this weird situation where it's like you have to have one leg in the system and one out. So, you know, it's a weird situation. But staying out of traps will serve you so well. And myself, I have been approached by people, 2 or 3 over the last year, who I'm not going to say that they are snitches or anything like that, but I do not like how they approached me. It's kind of why I don't want any new friends. I've got me a small crew of guys. Several of them I have met in real life, because I do believe, you know, meeting each other, fellowship, it's an important thing. You can't just be terminally online. Unfortunately, most of us are spread out across Appalachia and other parts of the country. But this small crew that I have, I trust them, and that's something about trust. There comes times in life when you do have to trust. But you trust until it's broken. Once it's broken, that's it. And you know, myself, going back to what I said earlier about the things, I'm not a disavouer and stuff. You know, I've been called a Fed before by a few people. And you know, whenever they do that, I'm just like, okay, real cool, yeah. You know, I don't even like bother. I'm like, okay, if you think I'm a Fed, go the other way. I am not requiring you to take my advice or listen to what I say. Because, I mean, what is it? Like, am I going to be like, hell no, I'm not a Fed? Well, isn't that what a Fed would say anyway? Usually if a random person on the internet accuses me of that, you know, whatever. You don't have to fucking listen to me. You don't know me. And if that's your opinion, that's it. Just stay, you know, go your own way. That's all you gotta do. There's not a lot of authenticity, I think, in these circles. the people in my crew and the people that I associate with, I believe are. They are authentic. And they all may disagree on certain caveats and issues. But nonetheless, even people within my own crew, we may not see eye to eye all the time. But regardless, I'm willing to consider what they are speaking about and their opinion. And, without, getting our knives out, you could say. In this thing, I have helped several people. And when I say help, I mean financially. Now, of course, I am not a wealthy person. There's a few content creators that I value what they produce that I have sent, say, $50 to here and there. But I've also helped out people in my crew and adjacent to it. Have some car trouble? Hey man, I ain't wealthy or anything, but here's $100 to maybe $300 to help you get your vehicle running. It may not cover it. I'm not a wealthy person, and I know nowadays $100 certainly ain't what it used to be. And I'm not saying these things to brag or anything, but it's because I believe. I would much rather help someone than harm them. I have helped several people out when I can, when I'm able to. I don't have, it's like I mentioned in that last stream, the cause that we are all involved in. It is one of the most noble and natural undertakings that you can pick up. But the movement itself is horribly degraded compared to the nobility, the righteousness of the cause. This is just my own observations, things that I've seen. But I believe in the cause. But to be honest with you, I think the movement is... it's very disappointing at times. Call me depressed, call me black-pilled or whatever. Yeah, whatever, But going back to helping people, let me put this out there. Be careful of who you help. Because theoretically, at a later time, that could come back to blow up in your face. I don't regret helping a single person that I've helped out. And they're like, oh, we'll pay you back. No, I don't want the money back. You keep it and you take care of yourself. Use it for what you need. And these are just everyday people. I understand how it is. I know how it is to be poor. I know what financial struggle's all about. I'm still involved in it, you could say. But staying out of traps. I'm starting to think that that's a lot of what this is. Because there are informants and there are snitches everywhere. And unfortunately, I believe the intelligence agencies, they have a lot of bearing on some of these dissident political movements. And it's not only us, Sure, nowadays, well, if you look at the history of it in this country, there was, during the 60s, you could say, the FBI, the CIA, they were heavily involved in far-left political movements and organizations. They also had a hand, of course, in, you could say, the far right. And I don't like the term necessarily anymore, left and right, but I'm just using it for brevity's sake. And nowadays, though, it's a really hot-button issue. And I've put this warning out there before, but what you're going to see is a lot more potential informants flooding into these spheres. And that is why I have adopted this policy of no new friends. I'll still talk to people, and I'll be nice to you. I'll be kind, you know. I'm not going to show you any disrespect, but if you try to ingratiate yourself, if you overdo it, and I mean, I can feel these things. You know, that's another part about staying out of a trap, is listening to your gut, listening to your intuition. If how someone navigates or how someone operates sets off your senses, that sort of sixth sense, you could say. If they make the hair on the back of your neck stand up a little bit, keep your distance. Stay away. You know, it's like Metzger said in a video that I tried to play, but my boomer ass couldn't get it to upload onto StreamYard. It was just ridiculous. But there was a video where Metzger says, you know, you learn to stay out of traps. You do away with childish things. Be careful who your friends are. You know, I'm not letting anybody in my little inner crew anymore, unless they come heavily vouched for by someone that I trust. This is just it's for my own protection and my guys. You know? Be careful who your friends are. Be careful who you help. Be careful who you trust. And going back a little bit, you know, I've been reading up on some things with this Ukraine-Russia ordeal. I don't like speaking about it because I'm here in Appalachia, but with some of the various militias and organizations, this is a very divisive topic in these spheres. People are either pro-Ukrainian, pro-Azov, or pro-Russian. I can understand from all viewpoints, but I do not endorse either side. I understand the Ukrainians fighting against the Russians in their homeland, but I also understand the Russians not wanting NATO on their doorstep. So, you know, I'm not picking a side in this. My opinions are still the same as they were that this started day one. And I'm not going, but I mean, if you look at some of these Ukrainian militias, I mean, this is, if you've studied Gladio, it's really not hard to see how this, and I'm not going to say that it is because I don't know. I don't have a fucking dog in the race. I'm only concerned about Appalachia. That is thousands of miles away in Eastern Europe. But if you've studied Gladio, you can see that this has all the trappings of how the CIA and the MI5 and MI6 and some of these other Western European intelligence agencies, you can see how this potentially can be used, how these fascist fighters can be used to create chaos, you could say. It's happened before. I think it's safe to say it'll probably happen again. So, I don't endorse either side, really. That might be a tepid take, but I don't fucking care. I'm not getting fooled. And like I said, I have no fucking dog in the race. Personally, I wish they would reach a peace agreement and the fighting would end. That's what I wish to see. This video's been much longer than I intended for it to be. But remember these things I said about how you conduct yourself, online and in real life. You know, you're no good to the cause if you're locked up or imprisoned. You're really not much any good. And what we're going to see is a lot more sort of conspiracy charges that for saying stupid things online, for making actionable statements. I think we're going to see a lot more of this happen. Be careful who your friends are. Be careful how you navigate, how you operate, and keep your guard up, you know. Don't be so trusting of people unless they have a proven track record and in your own interactions. Trust takes time to build, but it only takes an instant to be destroyed. Thank y'all for watching. Bye-bye.